Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Kansas and Wichita government and public affairs. Broadcast on Great Plains Television, that's channel 26.1 on Saturday and Sunday. Also at my site, The Voice for Liberty, that's wichitaliberty.org. You'll find this episode of Wichita Liberty TV, all the old episodes, show notes, and all the other content that I and others produce on nearly a daily basis. So this week, we'd like to talk about Project Wichita, which is a planning and community engagement effort. We'll get our guests to talk about that. Our guests are two of the four Project Wichita co-chairs. One is Aaron Bastian, who is president of Fidelity Bank, which is one of the principal banks here in Wichita, and Scott Schwindeman, who is a president and chief executive officer of Lubrication Engineers and the immediate past chair of the Wichita Chamber of Commerce. So Project Wichita, I know on a website it says it's a community engagement process to discover the community's vision for the future, but that doesn't seem like near enough to let us know what's really happening.
I think that's very fair.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. Project Wichita is really about getting a broad and deep engagement with the citizens of our region, asking them what do they want to see in the next 10 years, what will keep them in the region for the next 10 years. What we just kicked off this last month is the focus group segment of that, and so we start with these focus groups where we ask broad questions like the ones I just laid out. And from those focus groups we will then move into the survey segment, which will start in the next 30 days, where we'll dive deeper into the issues that the citizens say they care about and they want to see change in the area.
And I think that's scheduled to take most of the summer, is it? I think.
Yeah, should take generally through the end of summer, and then our intent is to publish the results by really by the end of the calendar year.
And then, so the focus groups, I participated in one at the Wichita Pachyderm Club. Evan Roselle and Misty Bruckner and a lot of people from Wichita State were there. And it was pretty interesting. I thought they recorded all of the responses. Well, not everyone, but I think most of the important responses. And how many of these focus groups have there been? Do you know?
Gosh.
Well, today is the final day of the focus groups, and we're getting a rush of people wanting to have a focus group. It was kind of interesting to me. This weekend I attended the Memorial Day services out of Rest Haven and ran into Colonel Olson at McConnell Air Force Base, who then turned to one of his deputies and said, have we got our focus group done yet? Because we need to participate in this. And so with that, we don't know exactly where we're going to end up with here at the end, but there are a lot of them going on today. I know Evan Roselle just told me a little bit ago that he did 3 of them today that were not on schedule. So we'll get those numbers, we'll have those next week, and really be able to tell the public here's what
This is kind of interesting in that you could have self-hosted sessions. In other words, you could view some training at Wichita State. There was a felicitator's manual, I think it was called, and then you could put your responses in online. That seems kind of different from the past.
Yeah, we wanted to utilize all the technology that's available today and make sure that there were not any barriers to anybody that wanted to have their voice heard. And so we thought, gosh, posting the questions that we're asking online and encouraging people to download them themselves, that doesn't get any more direct to the citizen than that.
Yeah.
I think when you look at our youth today and the way they like to interact, our old method was to have the town hall meetings and people would come and step up to the mic and speak their thoughts. With technology today, and the youth really embrace that. We allowed them to get that voice in there, so you get a much broader viewpoint of vision as opposed to maybe those who are more comfortable in a public setting.
Yeah. I wonder with self-hosted groups if there's any late night ones at bars or taverns that might be a little illuminating there. That'll be interesting to see. So then the focus in the summer, so research existing data and plans and conduct interviews. That's what your website says. So who's going to be doing that major work there?
Well, I would say that when we're delving into what is already going on out in the community, that's a combination of our vision team, which are volunteers like Scott and I that have said.
So a lot of businesses,
a lot of business owners, a lot of nonprofits, and some government as well.
Government.
along with some staff. And what they're looking for is we don't want to create any sort of redundancy between what Project Wichita is working towards and actions that might be taken next year and existing initiatives that are already going on in the community and are successful. Maybe we can help accelerate them. Maybe we can expand on these initiatives that fit in with the long-term vision of the citizens.
And I think it's the, I know it's not called the Hugo Walsh School anymore, but at Wichita State it has a new
Right.
name, but they're also involved in a way too, aren't they?
Right. They are looking at, in this first session of the listening, they're looking at all the data, and you talked about how Misty at the Pachyderm Club was taking all that information. They're taking that information and they're looking at what are the big topics that are starting to bubble up, and that is what we'll start to see next week when we complete the focus groups. What were those topics? And then the vision team will start to look at that and say, okay, what are the actionable items we need to look at? Whether that's an existing, initiative that's happening today, or maybe initiatives that we need to look at out over the next 10 years.
Because I think it's really important to both Scott and I that we're not creating any sort of waste in this process that we're running, right? To your point earlier, there's a lot of different planning processes that go on, and we don't want to be overlapping anything else that's going on today in the community.
Okay.
Right.
Let's take a moment off for our first commercial break on Wichita Liberty TV. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back again to Wichita Liberty TV. I should have mentioned that co-host Carl Peter John's on vacation this week, so he's not here, but we're talking about Project Wichita with Aaron Bastian and Scott Schwindeman. So we have a lot of people involved. I mean, there's going to be 100 or more probably of these focus groups that have happened. Tremendous amount of data gathered. I hear people talk in Facebook groups or something that they'd like to have a bunch of 50-story skyscrapers in Wichita, Kansas. That's what we really need. So in these groups, people will say, I'd like to have all sorts of stuff, but we have to be able to prioritize in some way to figure out, first of all, what's reasonable, what can we afford, various other constraints like that. How's that going to happen, do you think, in this effort?
Well, I think as we've been out there, and you participated in one, and I've been to 5 of them, and kind of just listened to the crowd, and you would expect that maybe there's some very high expectations, but Kansans are pretty realistic in their expectations, and they recognize that if you want the 50-story skyscraper, there's a cost associated with that. So they've been pretty grounded, in my opinion, of what they've been asking for and what their visions are and stuff. So I think, really it's a listening process, and we're just trying to figure out what it is that maybe are the big items that they would like to look at.
And do you know what some of the popular things people have wanted so far? What have they mentioned? Or I think one thing, they want Joyland back again, but I think that ship has probably sailed, don't you think?
I've heard that, as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I don't. Really, it's been pretty wide ranging, and of course that's how WSU is helping us, because if you just listen to somebody's statement, you may take an opinion that it means this, but when you look at really what the underlying meaning of it is, there's a lot of agreement in certain areas. I would like to wait until WSU finishes their work and presents that data to us, and then we'll be able to share that with the public.
Do you think people are pretty well informed? Because sometimes I'll hear people say, what we really need is a new library, when they've forgotten or never knew that a new library is going to be open, maybe next week or in a couple weeks, I think.
I think generally people are pretty well informed. I think that there's a lot that goes on in a region this size that it's hard to keep track of exactly all the different initiatives and the new entertainment options that might exist.
I spoke with a few people today. These are real estate developers that are interested in, selling Wichita and bringing people into Wichita. And they are really concerned that these things oftentimes end up too much downtown centric. In other words, that downtown is elevated above everything else. So we do have some of that, I think, with the Downtown Wichita group and maybe some others there. Is it really about downtown, or is it part of the broader region?
It's a regional effort. We've had 2 focus groups I know over in El Dorado, Wellington, Derby. So it is definitely, and that was one of the things we wanted to make sure, I think the co-chairs were in agreement on, that this was a regional effort to have a regional vision. And so I would say, no, it's not about one specific area. We're trying to have a very broad look at the South Central Kansas area. Aaron?
I would agree. You know, regionalism is the focus, and we didn't come into this with any sort of preconceived notion about what priorities might pop up for the citizens. They might, out of this focus group process, say we want to focus on the downtown river area. They might not. But we're purely coming into this listening to what the citizens want, and we'll take it from there.
Right.
And they were also concerned about schools. The public schools, is that proving to be a big topic of interest in some of these groups?
You know, all I can speak to, I've participated in a focus group myself, and it came up in the one that I participated in, but we don't have the information back to know at this point if that's something that was seen across all the focus groups.
I would tell you, Bob, that over the 5 that I've been in, it's been very diverse, depending upon the demographic of who's in the room as to maybe what surfaces. So, you know, I think Aaron and myself would be very hesitant to say, well, yes, school was something important, because we've not participated in the many, many focus groups that have occurred, and so we're going to stay out of judging that until such a time.
Okay, well, very good. Well, let's go ahead and take our second commercial break for today. I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back again to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm your host, Bob Weeks, with our guest today from Project Wichita, Aaron Bastian, Scott Schwendeman. So it seems to me that there's a bit of disconnect sometimes. Now, I know that Fidelity Bank has been involved with the Chung Report, which is a gentleman who's an experienced demographer and business consultant, I think, worked with projects like this.
Correct.
And he's documented some of the problems we're having with our economy, that we have very slow growth. We even have negative growth the past couple of years in gross domestic product here in Wichita. And that's a serious problem, I think, that we need to address. But when you listen to the mayor, for example, he says we've got momentum. And when you listen to Jeff Fleur, who's really the key person in economic development, he says we've got momentum. All these leaders are telling us that we have momentum now, and we've had it for several years. Yet, I mean, we're just growing at a fraction of the rate of the rest of the country, or even the state of Kansas. And Kansas is in a period of slow growth as well. So how can a project like Project Wichita help out with that, do you think?
So, you know, I think what is going to be really special about Project Wichita is I do think that it's born from momentum. You mentioned Fidelity's involvement with the Chung Report. We think it's really important to highlight and be honest about the challenges that we have so that we can address them and move forward. I think that Project Wichita will help outline where we need to go as a region for the next 10 years. A lot of these, I think, will end up being quality of life type initiatives that will make sure that we keep people here, and then we'll bring additional people here and create job growth and people that want to help
I
expand
should mention James Chung will be back in Wichita for, well, I can't remember what the exact event was going to be, but it's going to be June 11th, I believe, at the new Wichita Library, the new
that's right.
Downtown library. So that'll be one of the first events there. So it seems like, and I hate to harp on it because it's sad that we aren't growing as well as everybody else is, but it seems like our leaders, like the mayor, are just not willing to admit to that, at least not in a public way. Do they admit it behind the scenes, or do you know? I mean,
Well, I would tell you, Bob, that I think we are seeing some growth, and you can always point to the Spirit Air Systems and the 1,000, employees being added there, which will undoubtedly create growth in the smaller machine shops and those support features that go to them. You also see Cargill, and with the new addition just north of your facilities here, that will create some growth there too. And personally, I've just completed a joint venture with a Japanese firm, and we're building a plant in Mays, Kansas to produce automotive greases. And out of all the cities in the United States that we worked with them on, they chose Wichita because they saw the workforce, they saw what could happen here. And I think the mayor, because he's very sees those projects, sees things starting to happen. That's the first lubricating grease plant built in the United States in about 5 years. And to have a foreign entity come and establish themselves here in in Kansas and in Wichita area, and that's not just in Wichita, that's Mays, Kansas, so now we're talking regional. I think we have some of those opportunities. I talk to other companies worldwide, because we distribute worldwide, and there's a lot of interest in this Midwest region for plants to be located because of our work ethics and our values and everything. So that's why we also see the training being so important, that we have trained workers for that. So I think they hear those things, and it creates enthusiasm.
And I think piggybacking a little bit on what Scott said there, at the bank we see a wide swath of the community because we have customers that are consumers and home buyers and business people. And the last, I'd say, I've been back in Wichita now about 3.5 years, so I'd say the last 2 years we've really seen a strong shift up in demand, business activity, people buying homes, consumers using credit. So anecdotally, from my perspective, I think we are seeing momentum. The tough thing about statistics, as you know, is you have to take a large swath of them together to really paint the picture that marries up with the community. And so there are some challenging ones about our region, and there's some strong ones about our region.
Well, and some of these numbers, like for example, gross domestic product for MSAs, metropolitan areas, the most recent data we have is 2016. So there is some of this data, there's a lag. Job figures much more timely there, but we do have that. So let's go ahead and take our last commercial break for today. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, welcome back to our last segment of Wichita Liberty TV for today. I'm Bob Weeks, and our guests are Aaron Bastian of Fidelity Bank and Scott Schwindeman of Lubrication Engineers, here today in their role as co-chairs of Project Wichita, which is a community engagement and planning effort. I wonder if are we encountering any skepticism of the ability of our local government to really do good things? And I look back at the 2014 sales tax vote almost 3 years ago, where the city wanted to have a 1 cent per dollar sales tax for, was it 4 or 5 years? 5 years, I think it was. The city was quite proud of all the planning that they did, the gathering of feedback, the focus groups, the community engagement. I think the manager made like 100 presentations or something like that. Yet when it came time to vote, 62% of Wichita voters said no, we don't want this extra tax. And there are a lot of reasons why people said no, but they did say no. So is there a trust gap sometimes, do you think?
Well, I don't know. To specifically answer your trust gap, I don't know. What we're doing at Project Wichita is really listening to the big vision and not yet addressing anything with funding. And so I think, to start a project and talk about funding will very much limit the scope of what can occur. And so we purposely stayed away from talking about funding, just getting the vision of the region, what they believe to be true and what they want to see happen. In my business, when we're looking at formulating a new product, if I limit my research team to financial controls of how much that product will cost, I will get a very limited product that may not perform in the application. We have for many years not done that approach. We just allow them to look for all options, and then at the end of it, look at the financial and how do we work that. And so I think that's kind of the vision we've had, is let the public talk in this wider vein, and then let's see what comes out of that, and then we can address that funding issue later on.
Well, and another point with regards to Project Wichita is keep in mind this is an 85% privately funded endeavor. So it's volunteers like us and business people and nonprofit leaders and some government, but most of the project is funded and the volunteers come from the private sector. And I'll admit, as a volunteer, sometimes it's like herding cats, you know. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done trying to pull off a focus group survey and publish our information in a 12-month period of time.
Do you think that the end product will be, I guess I'm asking you to speculate a little bit, a lot of things for government to do or for the private sector to do themselves?
You know, it's so hard to speculate at this point, right? I mean, we are so early in this process. We don't know what the areas of focus are. We don't know what the action items that citizens would like to see are. It's just hard to say at this point.
Because I think people are often skeptical. I know this is not your fault, but they see the Water Walk development downtown, which is not lived up to, I think, anybody's expectations. And even then, the city strikes deals with private developers that say you have to submit an annual report, and they don't submit the report, and the city doesn't require them to. Then they look at things like, to continue the water analogy, waterfront at 13th and Webb Road, which is a private sector development totally, and they see things like Whole Foods Market, PF Chang's, a lot of the type of national prestigious businesses that Wichita likes to have. So it just seems like there's a big dichotomy between what our government's been able to do for us and what the private sector has been able to do. Do you think, is that something people need to worry about?
Oh, I don't know if I'd say it's something that they need to worry about, but what I think, again, will come from this Project Wichita process will be a list of areas of focus that can be shared across all different entities, government and private, nonprofit, and that we can all be aligned in what's important according to the citizens of the region.
Okay. So the focus groups are over now. So is there anything for the public to do other than just wait a few months until the fall or whenever the results are started to be distributed?
Well, the big thing for the public to do is when we kick off our survey process here in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, okay.
Couple weeks.
We'll want to make sure that everybody who wants to be heard goes to the website, gets involved, gets plugged in, and gets involved in a survey.
And will that be the projectwichita.org website?
Correct.
Okay, that's going to be in the show notes for today, along with, I think, your presence on Facebook and Twitter as well. You guys don't Twitter as much as the president, do you?
No.
That's probably a good thing. So, well, thanks very much to two co-chairs from Project Wichita, Aaron Bastian, Scott Schwendeman. I'm Bob Weeks, here for our missing co-host, Carl Peter John. Thanks very much to you, the viewer, for watching, and we'll see you again next week.